Now, The Hunt Palmer Show.
Yes! I feel like I've been waiting for this my entire life.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge.
Jolly good fun. Jolly good.
Locking down the middle of the day.
America's favorite daytime fun show.
Live from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio. This is Hunt Palmer.
Welcome in. Hunt Palmer coming to you from the Mercedes-Benz of Baton Rouge studio downtown in the capital city on this Wednesday. About half the work week in the rearview mirror. Maybe you're just getting started on the work week if you had a couple of days off. Either way, getting closer to the weekend here on 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge. Got Jacob back and Cassie Pizzali back there on the ones and twos. Koki Riley going to be with us in 15 minutes. LSU wins a wild one last night against North Dakota State, and they'll have another one this evening against the Bison, and then one more non-conference weekend before we get ready for conference play in a week and a half. It's a what-if Wednesday. The Saints have moved on from Jamaal Williams. We'll talk to Matthew Bruni at 2 o'clock about LSU basketball as they lose at Rupp Arena by 30 last night. Mass City Baseball Power Ranking, so plenty to do here on the Hunt Palmer Show. Lock us in. We start the same way we start every day with our Genesis opening drive.
It's time for Hunt's Opening Drive, presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge.
We're going to start with LSU football. And football? What do you mean? Well, football's kind of back. LSU is on the practice field in 3 days. On Saturday, they will crank up their spring football practices. And so today, I want to talk a little bit about the LSU defense. And then tomorrow, we'll talk a little bit about the LSU offense as we get ready for spring football. And I wrote a piece for LouisianaSports.net that I'll kind of expound upon here in radio and podcast form. And that's 3 players to watch on the defense during spring football this year. And generally speaking, y'all have an understanding of what spring football is, especially when you've got returning coordinators. If you're trying to install an entirely new system, yeah, like these 3-4 weeks of practices, like they can be heavy on install and you can really change the identity of a football team over the course of a spring. That's not what we're looking at here. You're not looking at a situation where you're overhauling either side of the ball. You want to improve, but you've got a lot of key players coming back on both sides, and you've got coordinators coming back on both sides. So to me, it's a little bit of a lighter transition in that way. I've identified 3 guys that I think are going to go through really important springs, and they're really all in different stages of their careers. But it's not something where I think everybody is massively impacted here, like it would be if there was a coordinator change or an identity change on either side of the football. So, who am I looking at here in terms of spring football on the defense? I'll start with DJ Pickett. DJ Pickett is the crown jewel of this signing class. Once Bryce Underwood moved on, he was like the next dude. Had to keep him around. Kept him around. Got the signature. DJ Pickett enrolled early. He was working out with LSU prior to the Texas Bowl practices. So he's been around a little bit now that we're in the middle of March. He's been there since, early March. He's been there since the middle of December. But DJ Pickett needs to put on some weight. He needs to understand the offense, the defense, and he needs to assimilate himself to dealing with college wide receivers, because I believe firmly that he's going to play early and he's going to play often. You look at LSU's defense. In 2023, only Vanderbilt allowed more passing yards per game in the SEC than LSU. Only Vanderbilt. Anytime I say only Vanderbilt's worse in SEC football, you got issues. LSU clearly had issues 2 years ago on defense. You all know that. But last year, you were 12th in the SEC in yards per attempt allowed and 12th in completion percentage allowed. LSU has not had the type of talent in the defensive backfield that they were used to over the course of better than a decade in a little bit. And DJ Pickett brings that kind of talent. Yes, Mansour Delane absolutely factors in here. Yes, Jakeem Jackson absolutely factors in here. Yes, Ashton Stamps absolutely factors in here. PJ Woodland's going to play. But Pickett provides the talent level that is beyond all of those guys. He's 6'4". He's got great instincts and great ball skills. He's the type of talent that we're used to seeing come into LSU, play for 3 years, and jet out of here in the first round. That needs to start sooner rather than later. Your first football game is against Cade Klubnik, who is going to be among the top 5 in just about every Heisman odds you find on the internet. So DJ Pickett needs to get up to speed quickly. It helps that by the time LSU plays Clemson, he's going to have been on campus for 10 months, but this is a crucial part of that 10 months. I think DJ Pickett needs to have a really good spring in terms of developing his body, in terms of understanding his assignment, in terms of adjusting to the physicality of dealing with SEC-level wide receivers. DJ Pickett, my number 1 guy to watch for LSU's defense in the spring. Number 2, Dominic McKinley, another former 5-star. He's got 10 college games under his belt. That's more than Pickett. But you're talking about a guy who came in during fall camp, got hurt, missed the first 3 weeks of the regular season, and I think that put him a little bit behind. Even when Jacoby and Guillory went out, he still wasn't immediately the guy that they plugged in there because he was trying to catch up. In terms of the body, like, he's got it. He's 6'6", he's 315 pounds. Like, he's a big dude. He's got to learn to play with better technique, and he's got to continue to get stronger. The problem with Dominic McKinley right now, and it has nothing to do with Dominic McKinley, is that he doesn't have a position coach. That's an issue. LSU's trying to practice in 3 days. I don't know who's blowing the whistle in front of Dominic McKinley. That's a problem. But when you look at that kind of frame, that kind of talent, that kind of profile, and a little bit of production late in the season, he had 2 sacks against Oklahoma. It wasn't a work of art. He's still got to work much harder on his leverage and playing below people's pads. It's hard to do at 6'6", 315. But that's a guy who theoretically could be a difference maker for LSU. Having Jacoby and Guillory as a resource for him is a big deal. He and Ahmad Bro are very close. Those 2 guys have spent a lot of time together, and I think are going to push each other. And so whoever LSU hires to be the new defensive line coach is going to be pivotal in McKinley's development, but I'm excited for what he could be. You're talking about a rushing defense for LSU that gave up the most rushing touchdowns in the SEC last year, a rushing defense that allowed the most 40-plus yard runs last year. You've got to stop the run way better than LSU did. McKinley could be a big component to that. Big spring for him. Number 1, DJ Pickett. Number 2, Dominic McKinley. Number 3, this is not a young player. This is not a guy who needs a lot of physical development or maturity. Not a guy who is completely unproven, just raw potential. This is a guy who's got a lot of production in his college days. It's Patrick Payton, 5th-year senior edge player from Florida State. Payton comes to LSU with 31 and a half career tackles for loss and 16 career sacks. That essentially is Barkevious Mingo's career at LSU. So you look at him and you go, well, what does that guy need spring football for? He's a 5th-year senior, been productive. Like, these are the kind of guys that you give springs kind of off to. He knows where to be. He knows what to do. He's an edge rusher. He's been an edge rusher for 4 years. All that's true. And it's very much rooted in truth. But I saw what Kevin Peoples did for Braden Swinson and Savion Jones last year. I saw Kevin Peoples translate Braden Swinson from a 5-sack player over 4 years. He had 5 sacks in 4 years. I saw him blossom in an 8.5-sack player in his final college year. If he can make Braden Swinson a feared pass rusher after Swinson had 5 sacks in 4 years, what can he do with a guy that's got 16 career sacks? That remains to be seen, but I'm excited to watch some of it in the spring. Pass rush moves, technique, leverage, hand placement, quickness, all that, whatever it is. I want Kevin Peoples doing it because he made Braden Swinson and Savion Jones much better players than they were previously. And this guy's already better than what those guys have been. So I'm all about Patrick Payton getting to work with Kevin Peoples and developing. That is a 5th-year senior that I do want to see pop in the pads in the spring. Not some sort of unreasonable workload, but this is a new tutor for the pupil. I'm all for it. LSU's defense has to improve. I'm not going to rehash the entire segment back from January, but I can paraphrase. I looked back at statistics, and I think a lot of us looked at LSU's defense this past year and went, well, it took a step forward. Like, okay, that's good. Because you were so bad in 23, go back and look at the stats for 24. It's bad defense. It's a bad defense relative to what we expect LSU to be. And if you expect LSU to be a team that competes at the top of the SEC, that knocks on the door for the playoff, that gets in the playoff, that makes a run in the playoff, that competes for a national championship multiple times every 5 years. And if that's the standard at LSU, they grossly fell short on defense. Statistically, wins and losses, production-wise, all of it. NFL draft will show the same thing. It's not the same as it once was. And to get back to being at the top of the sport, at the top of the conference, you've got to play significantly better defense. And so I've highlighted a true freshman who's got an NFL profile. I highlighted a former 5-star who's entering year 2 at a position where in year 1 you generally don't get a lot. And I've highlighted a 5th-year senior who needs to take one more step to become a dominant edge rusher, potential all-conference type player, potential first, second, third round pick. DJ Pickett at corner, Dominic McKinley at defensive tackle, Patrick Payton at edge. Those 3 guys, to me, are the guys to watch in the spring for LSU. Yes, I'm curious about Ahmad Bro, who I mentioned. Yes, I'm curious about some of the other edge guys they brought in, like Jack Pyburn, like Jamari Butler. Yes, I want to see what Tamarcus Cooley does and where Mansour Delane lines up. And I want to see Ashton Stamps improve. And what is Harold Perkins able to do? What is Jacoby and Guillory able to do? Maybe it's something, maybe it's nothing. There are plenty of other storylines to look at on this defense. These are the 3 that I think are the most important to LSU's 2025 hopes, because all 3 of these guys have monster potential that they have not reached fully. Hopefully this spring is a step in that direction for LSU. That's our opening drive presented by Genesis of Baton Rouge. We'll step aside. Koki Riley covers the LSU baseball team. They won a crazy game against North Dakota State last night. We'll talk about it next.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Highland Insurance Group, HighlandIG.com is that website. Is your business in a captive for insurance? If you are, your answer is pretty quick. If you're not, you might go, well, what is that? If you think your commercial insurance is too expensive, and you're curious for some sort of alternative that doesn't involve jacking your deductible through the roof, doesn't involve cutting your limits way down, doesn't involve adding a ton of exclusions, if you just want to find an alternative solution that may be more cost effective to you, the business owner or the CFO or whoever it is, the risk manager in charge of the insurance, a captive program may be your answer. If that hasn't been brought to your attention, the question is why? Jonathan Carbo and his team at the Highland Insurance Group handle captive situations all the time, and they've had a ton of success with it. It's for those businesses that have high insurance premiums, that have quality risk management places in place, and may qualify for a captive program. If you're unfamiliar, give the Highland Insurance Group a call or check them out online, HighlandIG.com. It's the Highland Insurance Group, HighlandIG.com.
You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Wednesday coming up here in 15 minutes. Got a couple of those off Twitter thus far. If you're in the Bayou 4 chat there on YouTube, hit us with some what ifs. If you got my Twitter handle handy, and hit me at Hunt Palmer 88. We'll get to those as well in the next segment. Koki Riley covers the LSU baseball squad for The Advocate. He joins us every Wednesday at 1:15, does so now on the Jim's Firearms Hotline. Koki, how are you?
Doing well. How's it going?
Going quite well. Certainly want to talk about last night's game, but first let's go back to Frisco where LSU won all 3 games. They had to come from behind. It wasn't always perfect, but they did do enough to win. Were you more encouraged by the fact that they did what it took to win, or a little bit concerned with some of the shortcomings?
If we're just talking about Frisco, I mean, to me, it's probably more about just what they did to win those games. And just especially with the offense and the fact that like this team can actually come back from deficits now and has the juice to pick up the pitching staff if they ever struggle, and they just couldn't do that last year. And if you want to get to Omaha, you need to be able to do those sort of things. And when I said they couldn't do that last year, I mean it was for the most of the year they weren't able to do it. By the very end, it seemed like they kind of could. And you can just tell with like the experience and the approaches at the plate with this team is just much improved from the beginning of last year. And a lot of that has to do with 6 returning starters. A lot of that has to do with adding a guy like Danny Dickinson, having a freshman who's as polished as Derek Coryell. So I think like offensively, this team has shown that it is clearly better than at the start of last season, despite the fact that they kind of disappeared for those 11 innings there against Omaha. And then I guess like if you want to talk about concerns, I mean like the pitching staff wasn't necessarily amazing, but I mean to be honest, like it's hard to totally judge the bullpen when it hasn't been fully formed yet. When you don't have a guy like Connor Ware in there, you don't have a guy like Gavin Guidry in there, and then with the starters, like I think Ianson's going to give you length at the very least, even though he might not be throwing 6 shutout innings every single time. And I think you kind of saw that in the Nebraska game, like the 2 halves of what a Ianson start could look like. And then with Shores, the stuff is still there. The command still needs to be there from a consistent standpoint. And one step back for him doesn't necessarily mean like we should be freaking out about him as a starter.
Let me play a little bit of devil's advocate. Not to say that I disagree with you, but I'd like to hear kind of more rationale. Last year at this point, they had just come back from a 4-0 week in Houston, looked awesome. I remember the lead I wrote for a column. I said, Houston, I don't think they have any problems. And like that was how I felt before they got to SEC play, and they face planted. So what makes you as confident that this team is actually better when the level of competition is not what they're going to see starting in, I guess, 3 weeks after Missouri gets out of here?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And they're just taking better at bats this year offensively. And like, for example, like in this Texas weekend, they had at least 11 hits in every game. They had 17 in the game against Nebraska. Like that, they just weren't doing that almost ever last year. And I mean, they would have it in spurts against, non-conference teams in these midweek games. And like they had one game where they scored like 26 runs or something, but they weren't really doing that against like power opponents until the SEC tournament, basically. And the fact that they're doing that right now and they're walking as much as they are, and they're just playing more fundamental baseball on the offensive side of the ball, like I think like that's a very promising sign. And the pitching to me I thought this week it looked roughly the same as it did in the Houston weekend. And I think the competition they faced this year was also probably a little tougher than last year, because remember last year, the midweek game was Rice. Rice is just not very good. And like Texas was probably around the same level as Kansas State, Nebraska, and DBU, probably closer to Kansas State or DBU than Nebraska. But like UL ended up being a pretty solid team. That was actually kind of relative to what they faced. And Texas State was roughly maybe a little bit better than what Sam Houston is. So I'd say like on the whole, they faced tougher competition this year. They clearly hit the ball better, and they pitched well enough to win these games and there's still enough questions with like what, not bad questions, but more questions of just like, what is this going to look like? And how will this look different in SEC play than it does in this past week in Dallas? Because I think it's going to look different once we get at the SEC play.
Cade Anderson's starts have kind of looked all the same. He's been awesome for 5 innings, and then it gets a little bit bumpy. Do you think that that's just getting some innings, or is there something more to it?
I think it's definitely something to monitor, and there might be something more to it. I don't think it's a stuff thing. It might be a stamina thing with the stuff, and just like him not being able to maybe not keep up. I think the velocity is more or less stayed consistent, but maybe it's just a command thing combined with, just sort of landing those secondary pitches consistently. So I want to see another weekend and just sort of see what this looks like for him. And like South Alabama, granted, they're not South Alabama, North Alabama. They're 3-8, but they've had some pretty tough competition. So this isn't going to be like a total cakewalk. But yeah, I'm just like really curious to see what this looks like moving forward. But no, I mean, you're right. Like third time through the order has been an issue for him so far. And against Kansas State, he was leaving too many balls right over the middle of the plate. And against Omaha, it was just the command just got wonky. So it's like two different sort of issues or two different starts. And maybe we're just looking at the sample size into a small sample size too much. But it's definitely something to monitor once we get into conference play.
Koki Riley is our guest, covers the LSU baseball team for The Advocate. He's with us on Wednesdays. What did we watch last night for 3+ innings?
Really, really bad baseball. I think I put it in my story that they probably should have put a Surgeon General's warning to LSU fans before the game started, because it was just like it was that hazardous just to watch really bad baseball. A lot of walks, wild pitches, guys getting hit, all errors, everything you could possibly think of, like a easy pop fly in foul territory that isn't communicated the right way, and it just sort of falls. And, the groans that came out of the crowd after that were, were pretty, were not violent, but kind of loud. So, it was just really, really ugly baseball. And I mean, you're going to have that occasionally. What I mean by occasionally, maybe like once or twice a year. So unless it happens more often, and once we get into conference play, I'm not like super concerned about it moving forward. They're probably closer to the team that we saw in the Dallas area than we saw last night, obviously. But kind of getting back to my point about the offense, though, like they would have lost that game last year. And they did lose that game last year. It was the Southern. Yep. And this year they won that game because the offense is just a lot better, and they take more consistent at bats. They are able to drive the ball a little bit more consistently. Right now they're on a heater when it comes to hitting runners in scoring position, but like whenever or if ever that starts to cool down a little bit, I have confidence that they're going to sort of get back to and score enough runs, because they're just really good at getting guys on base. And when you're that good at getting guys on base, you're going to create opportunities for yourself. How often you cash in those opportunities is a whole other conversation. And I think just like given how baseball works, there's going to be ebbs and flows with that. But the fact that they're getting guys on base consistently, which is what they weren't really doing last year, that to me is kind of should be the takeaway from this whole entire last 4 or 5 games.
Jay Johnson gave y'all I got to watch the tape last night straight out of the football coach's playbook. But y'all asked about the catching defense. What have you seen?
I've seen that Luis Hernandez is kind of taking his stake as the catcher on this team. It was pretty telling that they put him into the game in the last few innings last night. And I think Cade gives them more potential offensively, and you saw that with his home run. And I think Luis has really struggled with the plate, and I am a little bit worried about just his offensive output, even though he did have 3 hits against Sam Houston. But yeah, like regardless, though, like it's going to be hard to find who the reliable backup catcher is defensively. Maybe not offensively, but definitely defensively, if Cade is going to struggle like this. But yeah, I don't know. Like he's a freshman. They're going to have time to work with him. Like they don't need him to play every single inning this year, which is probably a good thing for him in his development. Probably what this team needs at the moment. But I when I look at the catching position, I see Luis Hernandez stepping up and playing better defense than I expected him to, given that he only caught 3 games last year. And really, like to me, it's got to the point where if we're going to talk about positional battles, like third base is probably a bigger positional battle right now than catcher.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. And you've certainly got a couple guys there that one hits right-handed and one hits left-handed. So it may work out of a little bit of a platoon situation depending on matchups there. Today, you got another game with North Dakota State, a team that's ERA is north of 11, and you feel like you're going to score a lot of runs. just kind of looking at the roster, William Schmidt, Jacob Myers. I think those two guys probably factor in. Maybe Maverick Rizzi as well. How do they get through the 9 innings today?
I think Myers is a good name to mention as someone who hasn't pitched in a minute, and they need other guys to just sort of like eat innings and bridge things together, especially since they used two of their better pitchers yesterday. I think they're going to need Schmidt to go like 5 innings tonight. And if they have a bit of a lead, then they'll probably be fine. But if the game is close or they're behind again, then it could get even hairier because I don't really know. They don't have a ton of options out of the bullpen for this game either, because they know Gavin Guidry's status is still a little bit up in the air. How fresh are some of these other guys? Can Maverick Rizzi sort of find his control again, even though it seemed like he was going to be a top reliever for the team? Connor Benj was warming up last night. He didn't pitch.
Yeah.
So I guess if the game got close, they could just throw him. And I think what kind of helps them in these situations is that, like, they have more relievers who can go multiple innings on this team than last year. Not just more relievers, but more relievers that they trust. Like Zach, like they didn't have a Zach Calhoun outside of Griffin Herring, obviously. They didn't have a Zach Calhoun last year. And now they do. So like that's a pretty good sign for them. And not having Gavin Guidry this entire time has kind of hurt them because it's put more strain on a guy like Case Evans who has to pitch like 3 times in 7 days or whatever it is. I don't know. We'll see how this all sort of shakes out, but my guess is that Schmidt starts for sure.
I would see it that way as well. Enjoy the baseball tonight, Koki. We'll see you this weekend.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Koki Riley with the Advocate. He's your LSU beat reporter. Does an awesome job there with the newspaper and good enough to give us some time each and every Wednesday. We'll step aside when we come back. It's What If Wednesday on the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com is that website. I know there are a lot of you out there that may think about getting into the market for a vehicle, but just don't like going to the dealership. Feel like I'm a piece of meat, got people swarming all over the place, feel like I'm being upsold and pressured. I get that. That's a common stereotype in car buying. You're just not going to run into it at Genesis of Baton Rouge. You can go to the lot. You're going to be treated like a guest there, not a customer. And their brand ambassadors are there to help. And if you still don't believe me, okay, just go to the website, genesisofbatonrouge.com. You never even have to set foot on the lot. You just kind of comb through the gallery, look at the different vehicles in the lines, and you decide what you'd like to test drive. You let them know. One of their brand ambassadors will come to you. Come to the office, come to the house, whatever. They'll get you behind the wheel. You'll see the difference driving a Genesis. Every single new purchase comes with a 100,000-mile warranty, 10-year warranty over at Genesis of Baton Rouge. They're on Airline at Pico, across from Women's Hospital. It's Genesis of Baton Rouge, genesisofbatonrouge.com.
This is the Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Still plenty to do here on this Wednesday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. Hour 2 is loaded. We got Matthew Bruni at 2 o'clock. Tigers got smoked at Rupp last night. We'll talk to Bruni about that. I want to preview the baseball game tonight with North Dakota State, kind of talk about some of the things we saw last night as well. That's at 2:15. My SEC Baseball Power Rankings. LSU last week came in at number 3. We'll see where they come in this week. So lots and lots going on here on this Wednesday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. We appreciate y'all for hanging out with us. Let's do some What If Wednesday.
Time, space, reality. It's more than a linear path. Where a single choice can branch out into infinite realities. Follow me and ponder the question. What if?
All right, first the one here. I just saw this on the chat and I think it's interesting. What if Texas A&M doesn't make the tournament and Texas does?
In baseball?
Yes.
That's a disaster for Michael Early, who would be in jeopardy of being fired if that happened. I just don't believe that. I still think A&M's a good team. I think they've got like 6 guys that can really hit, that we know can really hit, and they've got an ace, and they've got a really good home field advantage. Like, I know we've saw Mississippi State fall off a cliff after winning a natty, and Ole Miss fell off a cliff after winning a natty, and LSU had a terrible start last year, and I know A&M didn't win it last year, but I just believe they're going to be better. But if we're just doing the what if they don't make the tournament, with Jay Slaviolette going first in the draft, Ryan Prager turning down over $800,000 to go back to Texas A&M, and they miss the tournament altogether, and Jim Schlossnagle takes Texas and does something better than that, like, you're going to have rich people in College Station going, okay, we tried to keep the team together, and we gave this kid a chance to coach. He can't do it. He's out. Like, at least that's what I would do. But I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think it will either. But that would be very interesting. I mean, so far, we'll see. Obviously, the SEC, once conference play starts is when you're really gonna see who are the real players and who aren't. But moving on here, what if you could pick the gender of the baby?
This is a question that gets asked to like most prospective parents, and I find that most times it's just such a play it coy, just want a healthy baby and all that kind of stuff, which is fine if that's the way you want to like address it and be like kind of PC about it. I think it's perfectly natural for you to want to have a child that is your gender and is in that case more likely to share your interests. Now, my family is probably more aligned than 98% of families. Like, my dad is a diehard sports fan, and I'm a diehard sports fan. We like, going to play golf and eating steak and watching football. My mom and my sister were both teachers who love children and love being moms, and like, our interests are like exactly aligned. And that's not the case for everybody. And there's absolutely nothing that suggests that a daughter can't love going to watch LSU baseball with a son and vice versa. But like, I always wanted a son. I have a son right now, and I think that I want a daughter as well. So if I got to pick the gender of the baby, it would be a daughter. That's not to suggest that I'll be really disappointed if we have another boy, but I don't have a problem answering that question. I would prefer to have a daughter this time around. If you would have asked me the first time around, I would want a son, and now that I have that, like, I've checked like the box, so I would rather the other. Do you have are you willing to answer the question, or are you going to play it coy like 98% of people?
No, I'm willing to answer. I mean, plenty of people have asked us, and I've said I want a boy.
Okay.
And I think that's probably the usual sentiment for most guys. But I mean, I know there's differences, but like I for some reason just have always liked the idea of having a son. I don't know. I mean, I think
that's natural. I think because you're more likely. It doesn't mean anything. There's no surefire anything.
Yeah.
But you're more likely to share interests with someone of the same gender because of the norms of society. That's not to say that you can't switch them. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
But it's just statistically more likely, I would suggest.
Yeah, and I can see how from your perspective, you're like, all right, I've got a boy now. I'd like a daughter. So it makes sense.
And Alyssa, I think, wants that too. Alyssa is in for a rude awakening. There was never any like head out to the ball field growing up for her family. That just didn't exist in their family, and that's going to be happening a lot here over the next 15 years. So we'll see if we can throw in some of the things that her family generally did if there's a girl in the mix.
All right, next one here. What if you were asked to ride in a New Orleans parade?
Okay, so like, if it's just an invitation to be a part of the crew, meaning you pay your dues and you're part of the crew and you do all the things that are involved in that, which are generally a ball and then a lunch and get your throws and ride on the float, like, I would probably decline.
Yeah, me too.
Because to me, the cost benefit there is not, like, if you told me that I could spend the exact same amount of money to be in a New Orleans Mardi Gras crew and I could take that money and go play Pebble Beach and stay there, I'm flying out and I'm doing that. Like, And like, it's to each his own. I know I have a lot of friends who just adore riding in those parades, and I would like to do it for free. But for the amount of money that it costs, like, that's not something that I would spend that money on. in the same way that, like I said, I would go to Pebble Beach. I know there were a lot of people that were very unhappy you needed to pay $30 to watch LSU play baseball on the internet this weekend, and take the streaming issues out of it completely. Like, I would have paid $100 to watch LSU play 3 baseball games this weekend, because that's worth it to me to do that. To me, what it costs to ride in one of those parades, probably I'd rather sit on the side and come and go as I please and do that kind of deal than get caught up in all that. So I would like to do it for free. I've never ridden on a float before. My gut tells me I will probably do it at some point, but it's not anytime soon.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. It's so crazy to me how much money people spend on the Mardi Gras stuff. Like, I love Mardi Gras, I love the parades and everything, but the cost of entry for it is pretty crazy when you think about it.
It's just part of the culture for some people, and I'm thrilled they love it, because if they didn't love it, I wouldn't have anybody to go watch on the float.
That's true.
I'm glad, and they don't have any problem getting those crews sold out. It's just not right up there on the top of my to-do list. Alyssa's going to do it like soon. She probably would have done it this year if she wasn't pregnant. So,
all right, next one here. We got one from Twitter from Noah. He says, "What if Kevin Gossman came back for his junior year in 2013?"
LSU has a better chance to win the national championship. However, NOLA probably still starts that first game. And even if Gosman starts it, and for those that aren't familiar with the 13 team, that's a team that went 0-2 in Omaha. They lost to UCLA and then North Carolina. LSU didn't score. LSU scored 1 run in that game. So unless you're sure Gosman was going to shut UCLA out, then you're still in the losers bracket. And yeah, you get to bring one of those guys back, but then you got to play another game without him. Like, it would have made LSU a real handful, because that 2013 team was awesome. It was Ty Ross and Mason Katz and Jacoby Jones and Alex Bregman, Christian Ibarra and Andrew Stevenson and Mark Laird. And like, it was a great team, but you lost because you didn't hit, and Gosman wasn't going to hit for you. So I'd like to sit here and tell you they'd have won it, but they got put in a pretty tough spot there in Omaha, and they didn't swing the bats well enough.
All right, let's see if we got any more in the chat here. I'm not sure this one says, "What if Scott Woodward swings and misses on LSU men's basketball next year?" I guess they just mean if they put money towards it and it doesn't get better,
it doesn't
maybe.
Work. Well, I mean, look, I don't. Y'all know my perspective on LSU and coaches on campus. You're not going to hear me come on here and proclaim that someone needs to lose their job. But we all understand the situation that LSU's in. You're in year 3 of a head coach, and he's about to go 3-15 in the league. That's a very, very clear indication of where the program is. Everyone knows that is unacceptable, including the athletic director, including the head men's basketball coach. And it appears he's going to get a chance to fix it. You either fix it or you don't fix it. That's pretty evident. I'm not stepping out of bounds there. I'm not saying anything that anyone would disagree with, from the fan base to the administration to anyone inside the program. Everyone here is aware 3-15, not going to get it. So that's where you are. You got to go figure it out next year.
All right, one more here. What if the Saints never signed Derek Carr?
So you're gonna play with Andy Dalton? Are we gonna keep that going, Jameis? It's about the same. I mean, Carr's been hurt half the time. The whole defense has been shot. They hadn't any playmakers. About the same. Dennis Allen gets fired, and you don't have a quarterback now. You might be in a little bit better position to draft Shedeur Sanders if that does anything for you.
Yeah.
But you still have the same head coach, I think. And you still have the same executive team, and your roster will still be old and over the salary cap. So not too much different, I don't suggest.
Probably not.
All right, let's close it out. Speaking of the Saints, they made a move yesterday that kind of a headline grabber, but we'll see what the actual impact is. We'll do that next.
The Hunt Palmer Show. You're listening to The Hunt Palmer Show on 104.5 ESPN, Baton Rouge.
Closing out our number 1 here on this Wednesday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show. Matthew Bruni in 10 minutes. The Saints made a move on Tuesday they released running back Jamaal Williams, who had 1 year left on his deal. It'll save him just north of $1 million against the salary cap next season. Look, this is a situation where the Saints bought high. You're supposed to buy low and sell high. They bought high. They bought Jamaal Williams on the heels of an 1,000-yard rushing season that included 17 rushing touchdowns that led the NFL. And the Saints saw that in Detroit, looked at their running back situation, said, we probably need to help Alvin out a little bit, moving on from the Ingram era. Let's go get Jamaal Williams. And so they get a guy that had rushed for 1,000 yards and 17 touchdowns, and over the course of 2 seasons, he ran for 470 yards and 2 touchdowns in 2 seasons. And you look at Jamaal Williams' career, and the Saints did not get an outlier. The Saints got what it has always been. I'll go through Jamaal Williams' early NFL career. He started with Green Bay. Here are his rushing touchdowns per season. 4, 3, 1, 2, 3. Got it? 4, 3, 1, 2, 3. Then he comes to New Orleans. 1, 1. I skipped over the 17. So if you're going to do it in order for his entire career, 4, 3, 1, 2, 3, 17, 1, 1. Then you look at yardage. 556, 464, 460, 505, 601. He's always right there for 5 years between 460 and 601. That's 150 yards. He's always right there. And for the Saints, 306 and 164. Like a dip at the end, but then you've got the outlier, 1,066 yards. The Saints bought high on a guy that was playing running back at 27 years old, and over the course of 2 seasons, it just did not work at all. The only contribution Jamaal Williams actually made to the Saints was scoring that touchdown against Atlanta, creating the storm that happened with the players and the apology by Dennis Allen, and they didn't like that, and maybe that forced a wedge into the clubhouse and got Dennis Allen out of town. But outside of that, not really any production. This move is a very easy one to make. It saves you a little bit of cash, not a lot, but he's a 30-year-old running back. You just signed Kamara to a 2-year deal. Kendre Miller is still here. Who knows if he can play or not? And you've probably got to dip into the draft or undrafted free agency and find somebody else that can help. The Saints, over the course of their time, have done a good job at identifying some guys who weren't household names who became really solid backs. None more than Pierre Thomas, of course, you're all aware of him. But like Chris Ivory wasn't a guy that was high on everybody's boards, and the Saints brought him in as a solid reserve who gave them steady and dependable carries for multiple seasons. And they got to find another one of those. You hope Kendre Miller emerges as a real breakout guy. I don't have a lot of optimism in that. You hope Alvin Kamara can maintain a solid level of play as the tread on the tire starts to wear off a little bit, and he's taking a lot of shots at an old age for a running back, but you've got him under contract for 2 more years. You got to go get another one, and that's easy to do. Running backs are a dime a dozen. You can find a lot of 6'1", 225-pound dudes who know how to carry the football. You can't find Saquon Barkley on any tree. You can't find Christian McCaffrey just anywhere. Derrick Henry is not plentiful, but you can find reserve running backs that can help. And if they're a little bit cheaper than Jamaal Williams, so be it. But this is a situation where this was not a misguided sign. It was not a terrible investment. It just didn't work. You thought that once he got a chance in Detroit, he had matured physically and was a pro in the league. He runs for 1,000 yards. The Lions decide now we're going to go with the guys we got who are, by the way, pretty damn talented. And the Saints brought in Jamaal Williams, and it just flat did not work at all. So this was an obvious move. They've got to add somewhere at running back, but you don't lose anything here with this. They've got to do a lot more in terms of getting the salary cap to be compliant. This is a small step in the right direction, but really, hopefully opening the door, best case scenario, for a young signee that you bring in, whether that's late in the draft or in the undrafted free agent process, that comes in, turns some heads in camp, and can play for you for 3, 4, 5 years on a really cheap deal. Jamaal Williams, can't do that. Can't play on a really cheap deal and can't play 3 or 4 more years. He's 30. So this is a situation where Jamaal Williams isn't bringing a lot to the locker room. He's not bringing you anything in terms of production. No, he's not saving you a ton of money, but it's easy to move on from and try to open that slot for a younger, less expensive player that may be able to help you for a longer time. I don't see that as the case with Tyrann Mathieu. I think he does bring some benefits. 1, he actually starts, and 2, he's a great locker room guy. If you had 2 guys waiting in the wings there that were cheap that you wanted to get a look at, maybe I could see that with Tyrann Mathieu. But earlier in the week, I told you I wouldn't do that. This was obvious. You need to get rid of Jamaal Williams and move forward. The Saints have done that, so now they'll be in the market for another running back or 2 here in the coming months. Always remind you, if you're looking for our Saints content, find it Hunt on Saints, wherever you find your podcasts. You can subscribe to those anywhere. Of course, you can catch them on YouTube as well. We'll step aside here after a busy hour number 1. And we got a lot to do in hour number 2. Matthew Bruni with us talking basketball in 5 minutes. My SEC baseball power rankings coming up as well. Don't go anywhere. Wednesday edition of the Hunt Palmer Show.
The Hunt Palmer Show.
Audio Video Security Solutions, avssla.com is that website. It's that time of year we love to spend time outdoors, almost pool time, certainly time to boil some crawfish out there. Just enjoy some of the weather that we've got in the backyard with the kiddos. If you've got an outdoor kitchen, swimming pool, just a back porch that you like to sit on, and you don't have sound capabilities or video capabilities out there, but you'd like to look into that, Audio Video Security Solutions can help you with all of it. Give Mitchell Fisher a call. I got his cell phone number right here. Give him a call. Say, hey, the Hunt Palmer Show sent me your number. I'd just love to talk about what we can do in my outdoor area. Mitchell's cell is 225-439-7920. Again, 225-439-7920. Give him a call and start that process. It's been a hit for the Palmer family. We love the installation, have loved the customer service after that installation. Check them out online at avssla.com. They're on Instagram at avss_BR. Audio Video Security Solutions, avssla.com.